I'm Christopher Matthews. I'm running you through this next session, in which we are going to have two panels talking about social inclusion in bioeconomy solutions. And I work with C4 ICRAF. I'm leading the Germany office, and also I'm coordinating our what we call a transformative partnership platform on bioeconomy solutions. And in this context, we decided to organize this session here. I'd like to show a few slides quickly to introduce the session, and then I'm going to introduce the moderator of the first panel. And then the first panel will take place. We're going to have a Slido interactive session in between, and then we're going to have the second panel. So, as I said, enhancing social inclusion in bioeconomy solutions is the topic. Next slide, please. When we talk about forest-based bioeconomy solution, basically we think about how forests can be utilized to create products and approaches that help moving a forest-based circular economy forward. And we are thinking about basically three things. And I'm sorry, the last line has disappeared. But basically, we think we need to review our current understanding of how land is being used globally. It is not, everything is not what it seems. Not everything produced in agriculture, for example, is actually food security. There can be a lot of products in agriculture that might be questionable, and we are thinking this could be one of the ideas to promote bioeconomy solutions, forest-based bioeconomy solutions, by looking at what is being produced for which purpose. Second, we are of course thinking about new pathways of reducing waste, recycling, reusing, storing carbon in wood products. There are a lot of innovations out there, and they're sometimes very, very interesting. That is certainly the technical part that is exciting, but we think it needs to be embedded in the first part, and it needs to be embedded in the, oh, thank you, somebody put the text up there, in the third part, which is also finding new modes of collaboration, of finding solutions, and of learning and of inclusion. And that is the purpose of the session today. Next slide, please. If you look at the most recent UN emissions gap report, this is what you see, the various ranges where we're currently heading, where we should be heading to stay below 2 degrees, 1.8 or 1.5 degrees. And we think that bioeconomy solutions could contribute about 1/3 of the gap, 10 gigatons CO2 equivalent possible globally, not what we do, but in C4 ICRAF, but globally as an option, just to show the possible size of this. And we think it's an ignored or overlooked or maybe not enough discussed pathway to emission reduction that deserves more attention. And next slide, please. So one thing we did last year was actually developing a desk study on how bioeconomy plays out in sub-Saharan Africa, looking at socio-economic aspects. And we found a few interesting results here in this study. It's a desk study based on screening 350 papers, but it gives you a first idea of what is happening in practice. So, for example, we found that many of the activities in sub-Saharan Africa that talk about bioeconomy actually take the social sustainability for granted by providing such a more technologically oriented solution. But they ignore that there are mechanisms at place that keep people from making, particularly poor people, people in the forest, indigenous people, to make use of this and improve their livelihoods with these approaches. Also, what we see mostly these activities are very traditional. It's timber, it's non-forest timber product, non-timber forest products, and so on. There's nothing really innovative in those activities. We see basically in the north of the planet there are more innovations than in the south. We see also a lot of uncoordinated policy and policy gaps. We see a lack of knowledge and skills to move forward with this, and we see also missing finance and missing funding and missing opportunities for investment here. And so there's a lot that needs to be done, and that's what took us to next slide, please, to frame this session with 3 papers. The study I just cited is a 50-page study. Not many of you will read this, so we summarized it in this brief over there on the top right side, and you have the links here so you can consult these papers. This is an 8-page summary. Then we have a brief here by one of our panelists, Juan Pablo, and a few of our colleagues on social inclusion. That will be introduced in a minute, and we have a blog that is written by Betty, who's also sitting on the panel here. Hi, Betty, and that brings you the experience from the South. And so this is our setup. We want to convince you that bioeconomy transitions must be fair, equitable, and socially inclusive. Maybe because you're sitting here, you believe that already, and so we also want to take you through a few practical ideas of how to implement this, how to operationalize this concept, and what might be the gaps, what might be the problems. And so with this, I'm not sure I have another slide. Can we quickly go? No. Oh yeah, with this, of course. With this, I want you to take you into the session. So you see we're going to have 2 panels. One is on approaches to social inclusions, and the other one is on operationalization. The first panel is a little bit longer because it has the introduction of these papers. The second is more sharing with you experiences on the ground, and we are basically looking at 2 questions. What are the most important challenges and opportunities, and what are lessons learned in order to make this happen? And so I'd like to now introduce our first moderator, or the moderator of the first panel. Oluwasun, you're here.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. My name is Oluwaseun Adekugbe, and I'm from Nigeria, but I'm currently the Managing Director of Youth for Nature. Youth for Nature is a youth-led organization. We are youth for youth by youth for youth. And I think I like this session, particularly enhancing social inclusion in bioeconomy solutions. I'm very glad to be here because this is what we've been talking about in terms of inclusion. And I think I like the panel. Maybe we should give a round of applause to GLF Climate for these amazing panelists, because this is indeed an intergenerational approach to what we are talking about. We have young people here, we have the indigenous communities, we have everything here, and I love it. All right, and we'll be moving straight into this part of approaches to social inclusion. And then I have some amazing panelists here. I have Betty, and right now we'll be sharing just the relevant findings and of what we know about social inclusion. And the first panelist is the Learning from the Ground from Ms. Betty Osebonzu from Ghana. She's the project coordinator of Green Africa Youth Organization. And I'm just going to read a little bit about Betty. Betty is an environmentalist who is very passionate about nature. She's a member of the Green Africa Youth Organization, GAIO, where she serves as the project coordinator and is responsible for the implementation and replication of the GAIO Sustainable Community Projects. You know, as a young female innovator like myself, she co-founded the Trees for Biodiversity initiative, where she has grown over 1,500 trees with community members to restore biodiversity. Oh my God, that is what we are talking about. And she will share today about the reflection from our opinion essay, The Hidden Truth, Solutions for a Young Driven Bioeconomy in Ghana. Betty, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here today. I just want to start with a story. 4 years ago, I was walking within a community and I found a lady. She was cooking using a coal pot. Whilst cooking, she had palm kernel shells beside her, and just concurrently, she would put the palm kernel shells into the coal pot. And I asked her, why was she doing that? She said, didn't you know that palm kernel shells are like a very great energy that when you put into the fire, it produces a lot of heat and your food gets cooked faster? And I was like, oh my God, I am in a university and I didn't know this. I went back to school and I majored my thesis on the conversion of palm kernel shells to charcoal briquette. And it was successful, and now it has been published in Helion Il Sylvester. Then I realized that bioeconomy solutions are embedded within communities, and these are left untapped. There are a lot of solutions that we do not know about. Just imagine that I never asked that lady. And now ask yourself, where did they get to find this out? From their forefathers and grandfathers. And these are some things that we have left abandoned. We've left it. When it comes to bioeconomy and social inclusion, we've realized that we've skewed it to just youth inclusion, forgetting the most vulnerable, women and waste workers within communities. When it comes to women, recently GAIO is doing a project called Water for Adaptation, and with this project, we are providing potable drinking water for women within communities, because we've realized that although climate change is happening and happening fast, the effects are felt disproportionately within the men and the women, because the women are the ones that stay within their homes, prepare all the foods. Nobody bothers if the stream that they fetch the water from tomorrow has dried up due to effects of climate change, and they have to walk distance and miles just to go and fetch water, or the girl child has to do this. In the northern region of Ghana, there's a case study that women are not allowed to own lands. They are not allowed to sit amongst tables and make decisions with men. Just imagine the gap that's existing. And these same women have a lot of solutions embedded within them that are left untapped. Bioeconomy solutions are embedded within communities. Communities are custodians of natural resources. And these natural resources are birthed by women, but they are not included when it comes to decision making. I am privileged to sit here today as a black female to talk about inclusion, and as a youth to talk about inclusion. However, how many people of my age and of the gender have the opportunity to actually sit and deliberate on inclusion and sustainability? Today, I am fortunate to be in COP. How many youth have the privilege? The last time I was talking with some group of my colleagues, and I informed them that it's so unfortunate that we have to come to COP and tell the stories of the indigenous people. Have the platform be provided for them to be able to voice out their concerns? No. However, I am still privileged to be able to being part of that community, to take their stories and be able to show and share here. Bioeconomy inclusions, it just reminds me of GAIO's Sustainable Community Project, and with that we are doing zero waste within communities. And with this we're able to produce a book, a strategy, a zero waste strategy, because as we all know, waste is a challenge when it comes to Africa. And with this book, we made sure to consult every member of the community, from waste workers to fisher folks, to everybody that matters. And this is a gap that is existing now. We do not have inclusion in its fullest. We have inclusion where we just want to bring on youth on board, but we forget other people within the community. And with this book, I was featured in it, and as part of our project, we are leveraging on waste within communities to provide resources that can be used within the communities. And as part of those resources, we have the conversion of organic waste to fertilizers, and these fertilizers, the communities are the ones who actually sell these fertilizers and are able to get some income from them. And we identified that with this particular solution we brought on board, there were gaps when it comes to waste workers and inclusion within communities. And it was featured in the article I wrote, The Hidden Truth, that waste workers, they play key functions when it comes to waste management, but are featured less when it comes to decision making. As part of a project, we decided to include waste workers, to formalize them, bring them under the legislation of the assembly, so that when it comes to decision making, when it comes to waste management, because just recently we observed that when it comes to waste recovery, they are able to recover 51% as compared to the formalized waste management companies. And I work with a lot of assemblies and officials, and they were just so surprised that these people have actually been left out. And there is something that has to be done. Thus, with this particular project we're working on, we're able to bring them on board, we're able to formalize them, we give them the necessary protective equipment that they'll be able to use whilst recovering waste. And as part of the article, The Hidden Truth, we're able to show some of the plight that they are exposed to when it comes to their involvement in waste, how they are discriminated within communities because of how they dress. They don't have money to be able to get how we are dressed on the stage right now. They don't have the money to get themselves with gloves. So if you look at the article, a waste picker was featured where he was just picking the items with his bare hands. Just imagine.
Round you up now.
Just imagine how exposed he would be just looking at the COVID-19 era. Bioeconomy solutions are embedded within communities, and it's time we tap those hidden solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Betty, for sharing your reflection from working with communities in Ghana. That was very impressive. And I would like to also add to this that there's not going to ever be any successful COP until we learn to bring people that matters to decision makings. You know, sometimes we leave out a lot of people that matters. We talk about indigenous communities, we talk about inclusion of young people, but then we leave these people out of decision making, and then we just come with actors. As far as I believe inclusion is like including everyone that matters in terms of actors and stakeholders at different levels into decision making, and not just bringing them to so we talk about this a lot, and we hope that one day it's going to be a better one, Yeah. And now I will move to the second panelist for today to also share about inclusion from the perspective of rights and justice. And then I will introduce our panelists for us. We have Mr. Juan Pablo Sarmiento Baletti from Peru, and he's a scientist at the Center for International Forestry Research. Thank you, Pablo, for joining us. We'd like to hear from you.
Thank you. So, the lens of social inclusion to any sort of global initiative towards climate change makes us think of the very fact that although we are all experiencing the climate crisis, the climate emergency, whatever you want to call it, although we're all experiencing the same storm, we are really not on the same boat. And as a lens, what I want to briefly discuss now in the next 4 minutes is the key argument that we try to make in this brief that Christopher introduced earlier, that I co-authored with my colleagues Ileana Monterroso and Nia Stimniati. And what we're trying to work in that brief is to talk about how, although bioeconomy solutions, like Christopher said, they have much transformative potential, much potential for transformational change, sorry. We've been looking more at we've been hearing more about its technical aspects and its potential environmental and economic benefits, and not that much, or barely at all, about its social and its justice impacts on the indigenous peoples and local communities in the global south. So what we argue in that brief is that there cannot be transformational change that does not include structural change and does not have social inclusion and the transformation of the structures that create inequality in mind. And the thing is that we argue and we say, that there's a lot of lessons about previous similar initiatives, not just in the climate change context, but also in conservation and development, of what happens when there's initiatives coming into contexts where there's massive disparities in terms of access to justice and rights, to participation, etc. And the initiatives are not geared to engage with that, to support justice concerns. So even if initiatives themselves may not have a negative impact on rights or on justice, that they might not themselves make things worse, we argue that by not being tooled to support that, in the longer process, they might actually make things worse. So what we looked at in the brief is we took some lessons from a lot of different documents, research documents, articles, etc., from colleagues at C4ECRAF. We've sort of engaged them through three main justice concerns. The first one being redistribution in terms of kind of like the way in which there's access to resources, land, etc., for communities in the Global South. In terms of recognition, in terms of the recognition of different identities, not just cultural identities, but also like my colleague was saying, the differences in gender, in the gendered access to resources, rights, and participation. And then in terms of representation, which is more explicitly how well communities are able to participate in the decision-making processes through which decisions are made about their futures, right? So we know this, there's a lot of lessons about this work. And in general, we propose three sorts of solutions as a pathway towards bioeconomy solutions that engage social injustice and social exclusion concerns. The first one is something that we've been hearing a lot in this COP, and probably also a bit in the previous one. And it's this idea of engaging communities, not as beneficiaries, but as partners and change makers in different initiatives. For that, indigenous peoples and local communities have to be recognized as rights holders and not just stakeholders in the design and implementation of solutions that involve either their ancestral territories or the territories that they're currently stewarding and that have been legally recognized. The second one would be about ensuring that there are enabling conditions in place for the meaningful participation of these communities, and especially the women and youth in these communities, in all relevant decision-making processes that will affect their lives and livelihoods and well-being. And the third one is that these solutions, and we would say this about any sort of solutions that these global solutions that are being discussed in this sorts of context that are planned as a global thing but still have to be implemented locally, that they have to provide clear mechanisms that allow for a just and fair distribution of all its costs and its benefits from the application of these sorts of initiatives. So in a nutshell, I mean, the idea here that we're trying to keep going on with, through our work at C4ECRAF, is that we cannot separate the effectiveness of an initiative from its equity aspects. Equitable initiatives are more effective, is what we're trying to say. Involving communities makes initiatives more effective. They're going to make them more resilient and more successful in general. And as part of that work, we've been developing a series of different tools and a toolkit to support these sorts of enabling conditions for indigenous peoples and local communities, and especially the women within those groups. And I completely forgot to bring a slide about that, but I'll be happy to share it through platforms and Twitter and all that. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. I was about rounding you up. Thank you, Joanne. And I think that is very important. I took note of a lot of things that was said in terms of bringing indigenous communities as partners and not just, partners, stakeholders and not just stakeholders, or in terms of, and I hope we can hold IGRAF accountable for this in terms of how we measure this research and the results in years to come. Thank you so much. And I will move to the last presenter for today, which is in person of Professor Deborah Delgado from the Pontificia Universidad Católica in Peru. Our research focuses on global environment policies, sustainable development policies and environmental issues at the community level. And she will provide us with a reflection based on, our two presentations. What do you think about this?
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to comment these wonderful presentations. I really enjoy them, and I enjoy very much the composition of the panel. And we all know that ambition on climate change measures are growing. No? The numbers are staggering. The money that it's been promised is bigger. So the actions on the ground will be more ambitious as well. And in this context, social and political inclusion become really key. And we have to stress that very much because one of the pillars of sustainability is the social pillar. And we have heard about it here. We can read that on the papers and the knowledge pieces that have been produced for this panel and elsewhere. We have plenty of information about it from the last century, actually, that we can't ignore while we try to confront the environmental crisis we're living now. So, of course, initiatives should recognize indigenous peoples and local communities as right holders. This is something that we've learned already, and it's actually very, very useful. When people have rights, people engage, and people are more effective, and people reflect upon what's happening on a daily basis. So that gives us adaptability, that gives us better social relations, a lot of better communication, which is how we learn. That's at the basis of how we learn. So I think that might make a huge difference in the future. And that might give us the capacity to adapt to what we still don't know will for sure happen. So I was very glad to read the paper that Juan Pablo and their colleagues worked, because it's actually a way of synthesizing many things that we heard before and that we can now use for the future. As well, stressing the fact that youth have something very important to give us by their capacity to learn. It's something that we should never take for granted. And I also think that it's very important that initiatives should provide mechanisms to promote just and fair distribution of costs, and not only benefits we know about benefit sharing, but costs are sometimes or many times hidden, and we don't talk much about it. Several times we engage people, their time, their work, their expectations on the future, and that is a cost. But it's a cost that it's way more than economic cost. It's a social cost, and something that we have to take in mind. Our expectations, our desire, it's something very important that moves us and that give us the strength to work. So it's something that we shouldn't take for granted. And it's a bit hard to measure. It's a bit hard to be accountable for and reflect on that in an Excel page. But we have to be creative because it's our engine to keep on working and adapt to things that we don't know. And finally, I wanted to recognize that here the subjects we're dealing in these global landscape forums, the finance, forest, and food, are something that is key for the future, which is another F that, I don't know why there's so much F's here, but that we are constructing as we walk. No? And social relationships are the basis for our future. And I really want to close with this. The inclusion, it's something that has to do with learning. And we have to keep on learning to be able to face the future. We actually don't know about it. We can learn from the past, but we have to adapt. So all the tools that you presented in these papers give us tools for engaging with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think this is very powerful. And when you said about learning, I also would say something, inclusion is like learning from everyone, not just, a particular sector, learning from the young people, learning from local communities, learning from all gender related, So I like that part of learning and inclusion. Thank you so much. And now we've come to the end. We want to appreciate all our panelists for joining us today. But we have some time to address some of your questions because we know you have questions. And we will start here at this venue and give some minutes. If you have any question for the panelists, you can signify and we'll come to you. And if you're watching online too, you're connecting virtually, don't forget to share your question and then we'll be able to answer it now. Anyone? We've talked a lot about social inclusion today, and in different aspects. Online, do we have questions that we can send in?
Okay, there's a question there.
Okay, we have one here.
Hello, I'm Daniel Mudiarso with C4. We are trying to exercise social distancing. Does social inclusion mean that we are getting close to them, and what does it mean, being close with them? It's just, staying with them or incorporating their program activities or introducing our activities. I just want to get your flavor from different communities, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. And I think maybe we invite our I'm trying to not be, partial, but I think, Beto, what do you have to say about that question?
Okay, thank you very much. I love the fact he mentioned social distancing and then the social inclusion. There are two different words, as you heard it, social inclusion. So what we are trying with social inclusion is to hear from their own mouth and have them represent themselves on the table. And not we always rephrasing, because information is such that when it passes from one mouth to another, it changes, it metamorphosizes. Social inclusion should have these community individuals not taking into consideration gender, taking into consideration all social life, all ecosystem, having to be able to sit and decide their future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I don't know, Professor, do you have anything to say to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true that we are facing a challenge here with COVID-19, and we had to reimagine how do we exchange our ideas. And at least I teach on a daily basis, and having participation, hearing my students has become a real challenge. But we have to imagine how to reestablish connections to actually hear everybody. Because when we translate what people say, we lose the complexity. And we need to engage with the complexity to achieve sustainable future, sorry. So thank you, that's what I would say.
Wow. Thank you so much. And we'd love to hear from Juan. Do you have anything to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, and just picking up from what Deborah just said, because the whole thing about the climate crisis is that we're trying to find a silver bullet, like a quick solution, right? Which I think is, great. There's this kind of ethos for collaboration, or at least this discourse of collaboration and trying to come up with a solution together. But at the same time, my big worry is that in trying to find this fast way of dealing with things, we're going against what Deborah just said, right? Like this, slow down thinking and kind of listening and including and that. So what we're missing there in not stopping to listen is just the issues we've been discussing now, right? In placing priorities on one aspect of the whole equation whilst not paying attention to the other one. And there's been a lot of kind of discussion around this over the past week in COP because of all the money that's being promised for work. But a lot of these solutions build in forests in parts of the world where there are people that are actually living there. But I have very little or no representation at this level. I mean, we were talking to, like, Deborah and I, we were talking to our indigenous colleagues from the Amazon, you know, like, they were saying, you know, like, we just get invited as observers, but we are the ones that actually have been doing all this work. And, you know, in Peru, but, you know, we could repeat it to different parts of the world. So, yes, crisis. Let's try to resolve it. Let's try to find a way of engaging with it. Obviously, great that there's money being brought into the question. But there's still the issue of what's going to happen to the people that live there. And you know, these are communities that have done very little, if at all, to get us to where we are. Yet they're feeling the first effects, not just the environmental effects, but also the impact of the sort of initiatives that are being put into practice into the communities. So yeah.
Nice one. Thank you all for that contribution. And I think it's also brings us to what we've been talking about. Inclusion is really very important, and the fact that we always bring people that, you know, are not part of or are not in the front line of actions or problems to cope, to speak, and then everyone else that is doing the action and then, you know, facing the challenges are left at the back. That is not inclusion for me, and I think we can do better. I would just like to point that out. Thank you. And do we still have more questions from the, yeah?
Thank you very much. Very interesting panel. I was following a bit of it from downstairs, even though I came in late, so I was watching on the screen. Very, very interesting set of questions. I would just note that most of what we do in this world is project-based, right? We develop projects. We implement projects within programs, and project managers typically tick the inclusion box by counting people, and that says nothing about quality, right? What can we do to put in place some better indicators that people can use, because they're going to tick boxes anyway, and I'm guilty of this, right? I develop projects, I implement projects, and if there's not a box to tick, maybe I don't pay as much attention either. So can we get better boxes than numbers of women at meetings or numbers of indigenous people at meetings, and get some more qualitative indicators? And what are your experiences and thoughts on some of these indicators?
If I may? So what we did in response to that was that we started developing indicators with communities. So we actually asked women, you know, like, what do you want to get out of these sort of participatory processes? Where are the gaps? What do you need to be able to feel that you're participating more effectively, but also to feel safe when you're participating, because those sort of issues that come up in the sort of spaces where we work. So I would say that. I mean, so there's this whole thing about participatory monitoring, right? And bringing communities into monitoring. I think that's great. And when I started reading that literature as a student, I was like, oh, fantastic. But then when I started looking more into specific tools, I found that the issue there is that these tools are still being sent from somewhere else to be applied by communities, and sometimes, you know, not even that straightforwardly. So just like we're arguing that these communities should be included in how projects are designed and also how they're monitored, they should also be included in how the monitoring aspect of these sort of initiatives are being put together.
If I may add, it's true that we are used to work on a project-based scenario, but we have to think and reflect that actually we engage with communities for a longer run. Although we start a project and then we finish it, then we start another one. So we have to, as individuals and collectives, or practitioners if you might, take into account that the project-based, it's a framework, but we have to go farther ahead. We have to think on a more durable engagement with communities. And even if we stop working with one and then we change to another one, we have learned on this experience that has been project-based, but should go farther ahead. So I'm not really a fan of the project-based solutions for things. It's the way we work, but we have to keep ourselves attentive, not only to the methods, but to our personal engagement on how we work with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just add something small. Well, I love what my panelists said, and I just want to add that we should develop the monitoring tools with them within their communities. This reminds me of the zero waste strategy we launched in Ghana, and with this we engaged 64 different stakeholders. So now that's the difference with respect to your numbers. You said the numbers of individuals engaged. So this is where the difference comes in. The number of individuals engaged is different from the number of stakeholders engaged. If you're looking at stakeholders, and then you're looking at, you worked with fisher folks, you worked with waste individuals, you worked with ministry, you worked with EP, it's now different. So I think it just all boils down to developing the monitoring tools with the communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was wonderful. And we want to appreciate all our panelists and thank you for all the questions that we have. But unfortunately, we have run out of time now. And then we need to move to the second panel. But I want us to give a round of applause to all the panelists for today. I think it was amazing. I will invite Christopher back to guide us in this discussion of what are the most important challenges to social inclusion in the operationalization of bioeconomy solutions. You're welcome.
Thank you, Oluwaseun. Okay, thank you for taking us to through this first panel, and thanks to the audience for the questions. Thanks to all the panelists. And I'd like to, before we move into the second panel, I'd like to point to our online tool on slido.com. Yes, you go to slido.com, you find the hashtag GLF climate, and then you go to the room Bioeconomy Solutions, and there is this question: what are the most important challenges? Tell us in 1 or 2 or 3 words what you think is most important for you in addressing social inclusion in bioeconomy solutions. And this also goes out to those that are watching this from, not from this room, but from your home computers. Please add your ideas here, and we already have 4 ideas: land rights issues, that was also remarked on in the panel, participation, collaboration. Of course, that's what we discussed here, and particularly I like the idea of developing the indicators with the communities, not just another thing that you put on top of them, and we need to tick those boxes, but we need to find boxes that they want to be ticked, that they want to have ticked.
Yes.
And then the involvement of indigenous people, and and some more ideas are coming in, co-opting of inclusion. Okay, and we leave that open during the next panel, so we come back to it at the end of the session, of this session. So we can now move on, but please continue putting remarks in. And with this, I'd like to invite actually the moderator of the second panel, Mayumi Sato. Mayumi is a PhD student in sociology and Gates Cambridge scholar at the University of Cambridge, and now I'm confused, in Canada and in Japan.
To me both, yeah.
You have to explain that. And she has worked with Syrian refugees in Canada, with indigenous tribes in Thailand, with trafficked fishermen in Indonesia, and she also is involved in research on making this actionable for policy. So I'd like to hand this over to you, Mayumi, and please, I hope you are ready to take the second panel.
Sure, thanks so much. Thanks to everyone who's here with us in person and also virtually. As mentioned, my name is Mayumi. I'm from Japan, also Canada, and I am a PhD student based in the UK. It was kind of alluded to earlier in the first panel, but one of the silver linings of COVID-19, despite all the challenges that it has brought us, is that it has kind of reimagined the way that we can knowledge share, as one of the panelists have said. And so because of this, the GLF has really transformed into this kind of hybrid model of conferencing, which I think has been really interesting and more inclusive. And so today's session, all of our speakers are tuning in virtually, and so we will be focusing on lessons learned from operationalizing bioeconomy experiences. I am joined by 3 speakers, Vijay Kumar from India, Helena Teklu from Ethiopia, and Isabel Figueredo from Brazil. So first off, we're just going to do a brief first round of introductions, just about 3 minutes each to introduce their experiences, and then we will have another round of follow-up questions. So first, I will introduce Mr. Vijay Kumar. He is from India, and he is the Senior Special Chief Secretary to the Government of Andhra Pradesh. He is also the Executive Vice Chairman of a government corporation for farmers' empowerment. He will share the experiences of the natural farming program promoted by Andhra Pradesh, government involvement with women's collectives. So welcome, Vijay. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. 3 minutes is a very short period to sum up around 20 years of work. Andhra Pradesh, India has a population of 54 million people, and there are 8 million farmers and farm workers. In 2016, we initiated the National Farming Program, what we are calling now as Bioeconomy Solutions. Essentially, it was for small marginal farmers, improving their livelihoods, improving the quality of the food, and also for climate change resilience and for improving the environmental factors. We started with around enrolling 40,000 farmers in year 1, and last year we had enrolled 750,000 farmers and landless farm workers. So we have a footprint in 28% of our villages, and 10% of our farmers and farm workers are part of the program. And this was possible because of the women self-help groups. And 20-year history is the fact that we started women's collectives 20 years ago as part of another program for poverty eradication. So I heard the discussion on project mode and program mode. So what started as a project mode actually became a program. So we didn't let it go. So it's about 20 years and the program continues. And in the program villages, we have about 1.3 million women who are organized into 125,000 self-help groups. And these women have had a very critical role in taking this program forward in 3 particular ways. One, this is knowledge-intensive agriculture. So this requires a lot of support, mutual support. So the self-help groups, when they discuss these issues, so they teach each other, learn from each other, participate in collective actions. They also finance the intervention, and they monitor the program. So it's something which is managed by them and their federations at the village level. The second one is this program is a farmer-to-farmer extension program. So the women themselves are among our extension agents. So now 60% of our extension workers are women. And this is experiential learning. And the third one is this requires long-term handholding. So because they're already organized, so they're able to provide this mutual support that is required. So moving ahead, as I already mentioned, we have a vision that all our 8 million farmers and farm workers need to be transformed. So we already have around 8.7 million women organized. So we find that taking these experiences to the rest of the women should not be difficult. Lastly, I just want to mention the women groups enable us to be as inclusive as possible of the poorest and most vulnerable. So that is the strength of the program, that no one is left behind. So landless farm workers are also part of the program because they are organized into the self-help groups. So I'll conclude here because my 3 minutes are over. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience, Vijay, and I think that actually ties in nicely with even the first panel, and when we're talking about projects, right? Actually, you've been working on this for a few decades now, and so you realize that change has to be systemic and it has to be something that you track over several years rather than, immediate project outcomes. So this leads me to my the second speaker, Helena Teklu from Ethiopia. She is the co-founder of Climate Change Africa and Seed Bomb, Earth Champion for Climate Change from East Africa, and is a climate reality leader. Helena is the CEO and co-founder of Seed Bomb Ethiopia and Climate Change Africa, CCA, where she fights climate change with the help of African youth and seed balls. Helena, can you please share your experience of working with youth groups and how you kind of drive socially inclusive processes through your work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So by profession, by the way, I'm an architect. I usually focus on interior sustainable architecture. But other than that, as you have mentioned, I am the CEO of two companies, one of Climate Change Africa. And when the first project that we started with Climate Change Africa, and the reason that we started that project is because almost 70% of the African population are the youth, and we believed that, okay, that's where we can find the solution. We can find the adaptation and mitigation projects, different projects from them. So we started working with them, and we had different expos that we did in Ethiopia, for example, starting from 2016 up to 2018. We did 3 expos in Ethiopia where we created a platform for the youth of the Ethiopian and experts to come together so that they could speak, because no matter what kind of projects you have, as long as there's no expert or anybody that's helping you with it, it's not gonna be fruitful. So that's why we decided experts and the youth should come together and discuss, and we did that in Ethiopia. It was very successful. So, and then we continued to Kenya. We went to Kenya, to Kenyatta University, and then we also had an expo there. And when we went there, what we did was like, okay, so this is what's happening in Ethiopia. Through the government, we have a movement called the Green Legacy Movement, and other different plastic, there are different ways that we fight plastic. So, and then we went to Kenya and we mobilized the youth, and we're like, what are you guys doing? What can we learn from you? What can you learn from us? And so we created a huge platform that actually made us teach one another. Like, for example, in Kenya, they don't use plastics, or they use recycled bags to even for supermarkets. We don't do that here. So we learned those things from them. And through Seed Bomb Ethiopia, how we started was like, when we started working on Climate Change Africa, we're like, okay, we need to have our own projects too. We're just collecting the users' projects, and we wanted some projects that's tangible. So in 2018, we got introduced to the concept of seed balls, which are marble-sized ball of clay, red clay soil, black soil, and chicken residue in Ethiopia sense that we use. And then through those things, we figured out it's easier to fight, for example, deforestation, because it's so lightweight and it's a marble-sized ball. So it was so lightweight for us. And then we started researching what were other countries doing with seed balls. How are they changing the agricultural system? How are they changing deforestation? And so in 2018, we started that. Now we have a huge factory that we're building in the rural areas of Ethiopia in the southern region. And so through seed balls, now we're doing is fighting climate change through deforestation, where the different areas that are inaccessible to human beings, you can actually throw seed balls using planes on drones to those areas, and then we can reforest those areas. And for also agriculture, it has a very fast growth rate. So we decided, okay, let's use this also to change agricultural system, because it's 80% of the economy of Africa is agriculture. And so we started doing that. And then what we did was we started including the society with it. We started teaching them of the concept of seed balls. We started with the kids first, because we believe they're the future. And then we moved on to the others. And so through time, what we did was we created awareness about seed balls, and also we created job opportunities in the rural areas. We are avoiding migrations, even from rural to urban areas or so forth, and also for them not to go to different other countries. And so these are the things that we're doing. We're also eradicating migration. We're helping the rural areas to develop themselves, and we're also creating awareness for them, more of the indigenous communities. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Helena. And it's great to know that the kind of inspiration behind the seed balls also came out of this knowledge sharing that occurred transnationally, but then when you operationalized it, you adapted it to the contextual realities of where you're actually carrying out this work. And I think that's a really important part of the discussion that we're having today. It's also very important to ensure that these experiences address the expectations of youth. And so now let me introduce our third speaker, Isabel Figueredo. She is a program coordinator of ISPN, the Institute Society, Population and Nature in Brazil. So Isabel, we know Brazil has been introducing several national policies to promote bioeconomy. How is ISPN promoting these to make them more inclusive?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Good morning. I'd like to thank C4 and ICRAF for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here and to have the opportunity to share a little bit what Brazil is experiencing in terms of bioeconomy and social inclusion. I'd like to present a little bit the experience of Institute Society, Population and Nature. We have been supporting local communities and indigenous peoples enterprise since 1994 through the JEF Small Grants Program, which recently evolved nationally to a strategy to promote sustainable eco-social landscapes. And we have supported more than 600 grants over the years, most of them to promote bioeconomy. In this context, we have been experiencing, along with local communities, the amazing potential of biodiversity for income generation and development. However, we have also experienced a great number of imperative bottlenecks to prevent social economy to be the main economic choice in Brazil. So the grants we have provided to support communities and their enterprise, we believe that is one important tool to reach local communities and promote social inclusion as well as conservation. Besides being a project, a logic idea as the question from the public, which I agree with, but this is the tool that we have so far. What we have been doing is to continue supporting the grants for a long time, because we believe that 2 years, it's not enough at all to address this kind of problems. So the idea of supporting projects and giving grants, it's important to, because communities can address the problems they believe are their main problems, and they can look for solutions by themselves. They also provide a rich learning opportunity about project management that will help them to access other resources and improve their business management itself. So most of the grants we support are related to bioeconomy and businesses and enterprises. A good example that I can share with you today very briefly is a second degree cooperative called Cerrado Central. So we are working in the Brazilian savanna, Cerrado. Hope you know our amazing Brazilian savanna. And this cooperative is helping more than 25 smaller entrepreneurs in marketing their products. And their effort over the last 10 years resulted in important achievements, and I will mention a few of them. They were able to maintain a store in the main city in Brazil, São Paulo, in an important market. And now they are also selling in big stores like Carrefour in Brasilia, and selling in e-commerce websites, the big Brazilian version of Amazon. These market spaces are not usually accessible for biodiversity products and for smallholders and for local communities. So Cerrado Central is building partnerships now with companies, chefs, and helping a lot to disseminate these products to urban Brazilian consumers, because we are more used to consume apple, which is not a Brazilian fruit at all, than buriti, piqui, babaçu, this nut right here, and many, many other amazing fruits that we have. So the debate in Brazil now is how to bring the ideas that are associated with the social biodiversity concept into the bioeconomy concept. And just to conclude my intervention in this moment, this debate in Brazil highlights that the concept of bioeconomy may be too broad and does not necessarily consider the human component. It also expects high volume, low cost, standard maximization of financial results, and may not consider negative impacts, which was already mentioned this morning. On the other hand, social biodiversity has a strong social function. Consider traditional agricultural systems, culture, livelihoods, as well as millennial landscapes management. So we need to convince companies to change their mindset, their logic, to understand that conservation and social inclusion are profit. So I will end up here, and I could comment a little bit more in the next opportunity. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Isabel. And now that we've actually heard from all of our speakers, I'm going to ask each of you the same question. And Isabel, we're actually going to start with you. So the question is, what are the most important challenges and opportunities of social inclusion in the operationalization of bioeconomy solutions? So Isabel, you just already quite alluded to this already, but from your experience, what are your perspectives on the challenges and opportunities in this regard?
Perfect, thank you. So, well, we see a bunch of bottlenecks here that prevent social economy to be the main wealth generation option in the country and worldwide. For us, we identify sanitary, environmental, and credit are main bottlenecks. I will not comment the sanitary and environment a lot because it varies a lot from country to country. But just to say that here is a maze. The information is spread and it varies a lot from where we look for the information. And it's very hard for the communities to understand and to decode all this. So this is the first thing. Is the rules are everywhere and they are a mess. Regarding finance, which I believe that is more something that we can discuss among countries, we see a very disproportional government investments for big farmers, for commodities chains, whereas the social biodiversity chains itself. So they receive almost no investment, the biodiversity chains. This means very little access to credit, not only because of lack of resources, but also because of lack of information and preparation from the bank side to attend this public. There's a lot of prejudice actually for the bank to be able to open bank accounts for Afro-descendants and for indigenous, things like this. But also what we see is a very little access to other governmental investments besides resources itself. That are also essential to develop new products and improve local productions, such as technical assistance, education, infrastructure, and research and development. We need to have clear signs from governments in order to develop productive chains as a whole, from the support to the adoption of good practices for sustainable collection in the field for fruits, seeds, fibers, leaves, etc., to the development of new products in a very technological lab or industry. The agribusiness would not have reached the current status without a lot of governmental and private investments. So we need to have the same for the bioeconomy or for the social biodiversity chains. In terms of opportunities, I'd like just to mention that we identify the refined know-how that local communities have to manage, harvest, cultivate biodiversity products. This incredible knowledge needs to be used to develop these chains and to increase income generation alternatives, just like my previous amazing colleagues mentioned in the first panel, which I loved to have the opportunity to hear. Local communities and indigenous people are and all traditional knowledge associated with biodiversity are the main responsible for most of the conservation worldwide, and consequently climate regulation and water provision. So we need to take this into account. However, we need to have more information, more data available that prove to decision makers the potential of biodiversity chains for the global economy and for local development. We need to advocate in policy development in terms of budget decision, because budget is the start of everything, and incentives from governments. We do have some policies in Brazil, as you asked me in the first place, but in this very moment, because of budget decisions, they are very, very weak and they are almost dying. Going further, the government must create policies that bring competitiveness to chains that are connected to the origins and management methods of these products. Differentiate products and services by origin, by modes, by the way their production are, by organization, by landscape management, and then strengthen basic rights like territorial rights, health, education, transport, communication as part of this environmental strategy. The recognition of territorial rights of local communities and indigenous peoples are primordial matters that government and society must address in order to guarantee social inclusion in the bioeconomy. Without these territories being conserved and guaranteed for these people, we will not have conservation, we will not have bioeconomy in the near future. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Isabel, so much for your insightful answer. Now, Helena, what would be your perspectives on this question? What are the challenges and opportunities in terms of opportunities of social inclusion in the operationalization of bioeconomy?
Okay, thank you very much. So for me, when it comes to bioeconomy, and social inclusion, for me, I believe the opportunities are within the challenge. Sorry, the opportunities are within the challenge, or in other words, the solution isn't within the problem. So the solution is within the problem. In order for us to achieve a bioeconomy goal that we have set, we first must teach or create awareness to the society, regardless of their color, gender, where they came from, what we mean by bioeconomy. I believe that the society should be able to see the bigger picture. That is that resources that are considered waste can be converted to food, animal-fed, bio-based products, and bioenergy. For example, we can teach the society, or we can see the opportunity within the challenge of, for example, crop harvest. We can teach the society, or we can include the society in of creating an awareness for them that crop harvest can be used for also animal feed. We can also use it to make wine, and we can also use it as a source of energy, even for simple things like algae or seaweeds, where it can be used for animal feed, cosmetics, medicines, and biomethane energy. So these are the things that first we need to teach the society on what bioeconomy is. We need to show them what the challenges are, and we need to show them the opportunity within those challenges. And we must also include the society to be part of the decision making that affects them. It has been proven time and time again that people who are socially included have better physical and mental health. So if they have like a voice in the bioeconomy, let's say participation would increase, there will be sense of belongingness, there will be empowerment, that is, they will particularly participate in the community actions and so forth, and their quality of life will improve, especially if we focus on the indigenous people, because they're almost protecting 87% of our nature, and they have so many knowledge that we can learn from them. So when it comes to social inclusion and bioeconomy, I believe like the society needs to be educated first. We need to get awareness for them and then make them part of the decision, so that they could feel belongingness towards that thing, and we can actually achieve our goals through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena, and that's great that, especially as we're having discussions around intersectionality and linking the connections between climate justice and other forms of injustices, it's great that you're able to link social inclusion of, bioeconomy with, mental health, physical health, climate education, and so on. And so that leads me to the third panelist, Vijay. What would be your insights from the Andhra Pradesh case?
Without the social inclusion, I don't think you can operationalize the transition to the solution that we are looking at, bioeconomy solution. It's not possible. The diversity, everybody has to have a voice in the transformation. And To me, it's essentially a mindset issue. In Andhra Pradesh, since we have invested 20 years in building this social capital, where 90% of rural women, indigenous women, are all part of this group. So it's become a norm in the villages that even when a new bride comes, the first, make her part of a self-help group. So it's become a social norm. So the mindset issue is that we look at poor people as recipients of charity, recipients of aid, but we're not looking at them as capable people. Once we realize that they're extremely capable and organizing them unleashes their energy. So it's really a mindset of government, of NGOs, of bankers, of scientists, not having respect for the poor. So we believe that building these institutions of poor is so critical for accelerating. Because we had invested in this process for 20 years, I was able to scale up the transformation to natural farming. In 5 years, we have actually reached out to 10% people. So, and it would not have been possible this investment. So, said beliefs of the implementing agency about the capabilities of people. And also, I believe that we underestimate the time required. We are in a hurry. So the project is over in 2 years, 3 years. So next project. So we are, we don't allow this process to reach a logical conclusion. The fourth very important thing that helped us was that we said this process of organizing the poor, organizing the women should be done by the women themselves. So we identified heroes from within the community to take this process forward. So the government stepped back, the NGO stepped back and said, in order to reach scale. See, today in Andhra Pradesh, 8.7 million rural women are organized. This has not been done by just government. It has been done by the women themselves. So there are heroes among the poor. So recognizing the capabilities of the poor, respecting their knowledge is absolutely critical to build sustainable institutions which are inclusive. And once you build these institutions, the bioeconomy happens in a very natural, very seamless manner. So again, paucity of time, and as I said, compressing 20 years work is not easy, but I hope these lessons are useful. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. We're actually going to ask a few more questions, but in the meantime, for those of us who are in person or tuning in online, we do have some time to also address any questions that you might have, so please don't forget to share your questions on the Q&A. Sorry, can I open the questions? Yeah, there's just 2 more questions. So briefly, if each of our panelists can address this question. So there's a lot of discussion around engagement and full and effective participation and equity, especially in regards to this COP. And I'm wondering, this was actually brought up in the previous Slido, but one person did mention the co-opting of these terms. And so I'm wondering, how can we go beyond the words, and how can bioeconomy solutions play in making sure that this isn't just some kind of keyword or buzzword that gets thrown around? So Vijay, can we start with you, and then we'll make our way back to Isabel.
I was not clear about the question.
So the question is, how can we go beyond words, and what role can bioeconomy solutions play in this role? So there's a lot of discussion around how, discussions around equity and inclusion are co-opted, especially with this COP. And so curious about how do we prevent that kind of tokenistic use of that language, and how do we really make sure that it is an equitable, how do we really make sure that there is meaningful engagement in your work?
I think what I believe very strongly is definitely we have to go beyond words. And we have to see in each country, in each continent, what kind of solutions have worked, and derive lessons from these champions on ground and see how it can be accelerated. And I can assure you, bioeconomy, according to me, is perhaps the most powerful way of combating climate change. And this requires the very essence of this, session, inclusion. So the solutions which are working on ground are the ones which are inclusive, participatory, equitable, and respecting nature. So it's a very seamless combination between these, equitable social institutions and nature. So these interplays are important, but I would like to say that every country has these solutions. We are not looking at these solutions, and we are still looking at the sky for some great solutions to come from elsewhere in the future. So look at what we already have and see how we can multiply champions, multiply their work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Helena, can you give us a few quick insights?
Thank you very much. So for me, I believe that one of the basic things is we should learn from the mistakes that we have done so far, or if they're not mistakes, the moves that we have done so far that have not been working, we should change those things. And as the speaker before me said, bioeconomy is, I believe, will change the game of what we're talking about. So in order for us to change the game and also learn from our mistakes, we have to go within deep and really have an open-minded conversation. And as he said, we have to learn from one another too. Climate change is not something that I confided alone, Ethiopia itself confided alone. It's something that we all should come together and work as one. And in order for us to achieve that, bioeconomy has to be part of that. I believe that's one of the steps to do that. But in order for us to do that, we have to avoid this racist mindset that we have, this inclusion on gender and everything that we have, and then come together as one and actually focus on the problems that are right in front of us. And we should really find the solutions within, because a problem always comes with a solution, I believe. So let's focus on the solution, the mistakes we've done so far, and then let's start looking for other ways or change the way that we've been approaching things so far.
Excellent, thank you so much. And Isabel?
It's a very good question. I was wondering, I don't know, I don't think we have the answers now, but what come to my mind and what I was thinking to share is that we need to study, we need to understand more about the reality of the communities, what they are facing, and then promote a very respectful dialogue. Where we put ourselves, those from the big donors, from the United Nations, from the NGOs, and from the governments. We need to put ourselves in the same level of the communities to have a very horizontal dialogue. And we don't have the answers. So we cannot bring the solutions from outside. We need to discuss and hear from them and build together maybe the solutions, but the solutions don't come from outside. And this is important because most of the donors, the big donors, besides having all these boxes to fill up and to have these keywords like engagement and equality and so on and gender, but they have in their manuals, in their information, they sometimes don't give the opportunity for those that are receiving the money to make choices, to look for solutions. So sometimes for you to reach that resource, you need to fill all the boxes, but at the same time, I don't think that filling all that boxes, we are really engaging. So let's sit with them, let's hear from them, and let's build solutions together, or even promote the solutions that they build themselves. I think this could be my contribution. Very hard question.
Thank you, Isabel. And And thank you to all of the panelists. So we do have just one more question. The European Commission defines the bioeconomy as the production of renewable biological resources and the conversion of these resources and waste streams into value-added products such as food, feed, bio-based products, and bioenergy. But as you can see from this definition omits any discussion or definitions around social aspects. And so wondering in terms of redefining this term then, is there a definition that you would suggest that we should start to look into to start reframing this narrative around bioeconomy? Isabel, if we could start with you.
Wow, yeah. Well, I would love to have some time to discuss with my colleagues some suggestion of reframing this, and a new definition could be an amazing activity that the Global Landscape Forum promotes during the next 2 months, that we could join together and promote a new suggestion for the EU, including all the social inclusion indeed. But from now, what I can say is all I have said before, is that the communities already have all the knowledge. So inside this definition, we need to have what you just read, but something like respecting local communities, bringing them to the same table to discuss, to decide. Why don't we have indigenous peoples in the main table of the COP deciding their future? This is an example of how we do things. We include the right names, but we don't put the right people to decide. So it would be amazing to have in this definition some guarantees that all the social aspect would be respected and promoted, but also that these guys would be sitting in the right tables to participate in these decisions. But let's do some work. Task force to have this new proposition of a definition. Thank you.
Okay, we are starting to wrap up, but if you, to the other panelists, if you have a brief insight on what you think can be contributed to redefine this definition, please feel free, Vijay or Helena.
Yeah. I would like to say, FAO has already defined agroecology, 10 elements of agroecology, and the high-level panel of experts have come out with the 13 principles of agroecology. I think that's a more inclusive definition, which includes what has to be done on the what's called as the bioeconomy, but also around institutions, governance. So I think that's a more holistic term. I would prefer that, because that's been endorsed by so many countries, so many organizations. So why do we have new term? Why don't we stick to what's already come out in the high-level panel of experts report? Thank you.
Thank you. And any last words to Helena?
Well, for me, the way I would define bioeconomy is literally moving away from take, make, use, discard, and going towards make, use, recycle, take approach. So that's my definition for bioeconomy.
Okay. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. And unfortunately, we have run out of time, so I'm going to pass it back to Christopher. But thank you to everyone who's tuned in for this panel.
Thank you, Mayumi. Thank you to the panelists. That was a great discussion. A lot of additional questions came up, and I must say I feel a little bit like Ray Charles when he sings, "I was blind and now I see." Of course, he was a blind singer, so that's maybe a little bit ironic, but why I was blind is actually because I came into this discussion much more thinking from the viewpoint of globalization. A few years ago, we had a request being sent by the airline industry to like 10 people in C4 at the same time, asking basically the same question. Can you tell us where you would be sourcing, or where we can be sourcing biofuels for the airline industry? And we scratched our heads and we said, yeah, it's not like this. We developed a letter and we wrote back to them, and it's not like you go somewhere and you sign a contract and you get 100,000 million, whatever, liters of biofuels right away. So you need to develop communities, you need to do a lot of things before that actually flies. And they never came back to us on this answer that we sent to them, so maybe they didn't like the answer. But, I'm sure they didn't like the answer, but what I learned in this panel, in these two panels now today and in this session, is actually that there's a much more interesting body of bottom-up development of bioeconomy solutions, and that really opened my eyes. And I think that's probably something we should be looking at when we go forward with this work. So thanks a lot to all of you. It was really amazing, and I really liked and enjoyed this session a lot. A quick look back at our Slido poll or word cloud. What comes up here? Capitalism, very big, yeah. Representativeness, political will, land rights issues. These are the 4 largest topics, and then there are a few others like bottom-up solutions, lack of culture inclusion. And there's also another one in French, genre, culture, pauvreté, so culture also, and poverty, and gender, racism, being taken seriously, mutual learning. So there's a lot around learning, around the question of top-down versus bottom-up implementation, and the problems we are seeing, like lack of financial support, lack of education. And I think all of you brought these things up in your contribution. So I think this is a nice summary, maybe. I don't know if there's anything we didn't touch on. Biopiracy, perhaps. Yeah. But thanks for everybody who contributed to this. So I'd like to close here and really say I think we're going to take this forward and actually doing it in the context of a transformative partnership platform, actually coming back to this discussion and coming back to all of you on this, and how to move forward with a stronger view on the bottom-up development of bioeconomy solutions and how we can support this from our end. I also would like to say one thing I should have said in the beginning. This session wouldn't have been possible without work by my colleague Ileana Monterosso. I know, Ileana, you're listening, so thanks a lot. Thanks 1,000 times for this. You really made this session happening. You put together all the panels, and you contacted everybody in the last 3 weeks, and we had these 3 papers written by the very willing and collaborative friends and colleagues here, and I really appreciate the effort put together into this. We wanted a session that has something to read, so you can go back and read this stuff and learn maybe something from it, and also you can of course watch the session again online on, I think, YouTube or GLF channel. So and we're going to be back on this, and thanks a lot for being here. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.